It's episode 10, and today's episode is going to be a little different. Welcome to Conversation with Everyday Youth Workers. This is the Youth Worker Daily. Well, welcome back to Conversation with Everyday Youth Workers, the podcast of the Youth Worker Daily. My name is Jay Hyam, and it is our hope here at the Youth Worker Daily to encourage youth workers just like you with tools, tips, resources, and helps so that you thrive in your ministry. And today is episode 10 of our podcast series, Conversation with Everyday Youth Workers. And today's going to be a little different in the sense that we're not going to really have a conversation with anybody. More so, it's going to be me hopefully having a conversation with you, our listener. And the reason I'm doing this is this is episode 10. We've had 9 great episodes. Of those 9, 8 of them are conversations with various youth workers in various stages of ministry. Some of them are now doing other things within the realms of youth ministry, like we talked to Brian Abbey, who is a youth consultant, or a youth coach, or not really sure what they call him. Anyhow, he works with Slingshot in helping churches be matched up with youth workers and making sure there's a good fit and getting them started in their new churches. Great conversation with him. We talked with Justin Herman, one of the early episodes. Justin is a friend of mine. You'll know Justin as the host of the Controlled Chaos podcast. He has been doing the podcast for a number of years and just has done awesome things with it. It's a great podcast. But we talked recently, and he has started a new ministry venture working with an organization called R12. And then we've just had some great conversations talking with youth workers who are in the trenches of youth ministry doing what they do. And what's been kind of fun about all of this is not only are we getting to hear about what youth workers are doing, what God's doing in, through, and with them in their ministries, but we're also spending some time talking about the impact that the COVID-19 virus has had on ministry. And so we've talked about what it looks like for us to do ministry online. We've kind of talked about what we think ministry is going to look like moving forward throughout the summer. And we've even talked a little bit about what we kind of are envisioning and hoping for as we begin thinking about fall and getting back together with our students in some type of normalcy or regular gathering in person. And then we just talked about some great resources that have been out there. So all of that is to say, these first 9 episodes have really been fun. I know for me, after each conversation that I've had, I've just gotten off of the Zoom call. I've gone back and I've listened to it as I've kind of edited and put things together and gotten it ready for the podcast launch. There's just so much that has come from these conversations that have encouraged me, that have challenged me, great ideas that I've put in my toolbox that I'm planning to use. And it's just been a good time to talk with youth workers and to hear what's going on in the course of ministry and in life. And that's really what this podcast is all about. I know there are tons of podcasts out there, and there are some really good youth ministry ones. And, my hope is not just to be another, quick fix podcast, but really more of one that allows youth workers to really share what God's been doing in their ministries, and in that, hopefully to encourage other youth workers. I think through this season, I know the conversation I had on one of the early episodes with my friend Andy, we talked about just the frustration that we were feeling as we moved through this season of COVID, and just the frustration of not being able to do things the way we wanted to, and also kind of that feeling of failure, because we are, as youth workers, we are wired to to be with students. We want those relationships. We want to connect with them. We want to be involved in their lives. And Andy expressed some feelings of failure because he just hasn't been able to do it. And he hasn't been able to do a lot of things well because of all of this. And so my hope is that, like I said, conversations as we move forward, that they begin to, encourage us and help us. That all leads me to the purpose of this episode 10, and why I'm doing it this way and not having another conversation with a youth worker. Because as I wrap up this first season, 10 episodes, I'm beginning to think about what this podcast could become. And really what I'd like for it to become is more of what we've started out to do, and that is to have conversations with everyday youth workers. And so as I think through what I'd like to see happen for season 2, episodes 11 to 20 or 25, somewhere in that range. I'm planning for maybe 10 or 15 episodes this next season. What I'd like to see happen is I'd like to have more conversations with youth workers. And so on today's podcast, really what I want to do is make an appeal to you, the youth workers, to come and be a guest. We've started saying this on our podcast, inviting you to be a guest. We've said things like, you don't have to have a book published. You don't have to have your own resource website, or you don't have to have your own podcast, although we will continue to talk to youth workers who are doing those things. Really what we want is we want youth workers who are just, entrenched in everyday youth ministry. We want to hear from you. We want to get to know you. We want to hear your passions, and we want to hear what God's doing with you and through you as you impact the lives of your students. What I have found over the years in youth ministry is that we all have stories. We all have the things that God is doing, and we don't always have the opportunity to share them. I shared earlier here at the beginning of the podcast that in my early days of working and volunteering with the National Youth Workers Convention, one of the things that really kind of inspired me and encouraged me was the opportunity to sit down and talk with youth workers and just hear what God is doing in their ministries. Things that we wouldn't normally have the opportunity to share. But what I had found is that as I listened to these stories from other youth workers, I was being encouraged. I was getting good ideas. I was kind of learning about what ministry looks like in other contexts. I've worked in smaller to mid-sized churches, mostly in rural settings. And so ministry is significantly different from what ministry to students might look like in larger churches in maybe urban or suburban settings. And so having these conversations, I've just been able to learn so much from other youth workers that it has helped the way I think about youth ministry, not just from my students, but more, universally as we think about what student ministry looks like. And so a lot of that has kind of really been the seed for this podcast, knowing that we have these stories and we don't get a chance to share them. And so I want to hear those stories. I want to share those stories, and I want other youth workers to hear these stories. And so Conversations with Everyday Youth Workers is really a podcast for the everyday youth worker. And so we're going to take just a couple of weeks off here. Right now, as I am recording this podcast, it is July the 9th. We have just wrapped up the 4th of July holiday. And at this recording, a lot of things are happening. We've just come through a real tumultuous time in our country. COVID is now beginning to peak in some areas. Some states are coming back with more restrictions. I know where I live, we are now mandated to be wearing masks everywhere. we are, in the middle of the summer. There are still a number of weeks to go before we think about going back to school and the fall. But even as we kind of move through this time, now the question is, what will fall look like? Will we be able to get back with our students this fall? Some churches are already back with their students. Some, like my church, like we still are not meeting face to face with our students. But what we want to do is we want to take a couple weeks off, and I'm going to use this time to kind of line up our next string of podcast guests. So I want to put this podcast episode out there and the invitation to all youth workers. If you would like to be a guest, it's real simple. All you need to do is to reach out to me. You can use our email. Our email is pretty simple. It's theyouthworkerdaily@gmail.com. You can send me a direct message through the email to simply say, tell me who you are, where you're serving, and that you want to be a guest, and I'll reach out to you, and we can set that up. You can reach out to me on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Just simply look up at YTH Worker Daily, Youth Worker, YTH Worker Daily. And you can message us on any one of those platforms, and I will get back to you. But really, setting up an interview is pretty easy. All you need to do is to accept a Zoom invitation, and you pick the date, you pick the time that works for you and your schedule. We set up the Zoom call. We talk for about an hour. We get to know each other, and then we jump into the whole recording process here. And then afterwards, I really try not to cut the interviews unless there's like an audio glitch or some type of technical issue. Really, my goal is to have the whole conversation recorded and then be able to share it with you guys here on the podcast. That's what we've been doing so far. And so we'll talk for a little more than an hour, create the content, and then I put it all together with some openers and some closers, and there you have it. So it's a pretty seamless and easy thing to do. So if you'd like to be a guest, I'd love to have you. And so would you do that? Would you reach out and let us know? There are a number of youth workers that I want to speak with, that I have met over the years and become good friends with. And so I'll be reaching out to a number of them to bring them in to the conversation here and have them share their stories. And all of that will be, exciting and good. So with all of that said, I'm going to try to keep this podcast fairly short. We're approaching somewhere around the 15-minute realm here. And so, just reach out to us. Look us up on our website. That's another way you can reach out to us. Just go to the website and click on the link for podcasts, and you can actually submit your desire to be a guest right through the website. The website's easy to find, theyouthworkerdaily.com. But as we move forward, I'm looking for another great season filled with conversations and encouragement for youth workers. So to all of our first guests, don't want to run through all the names, but from our very first episodes to last week's episode with Josh McLemore, guys, thank you to all of my guests. I just appreciate having you guys be a part of this first season, and looking forward to what God has in store for the podcast and the website and our social media as we move a little forward in the summer. So when will the next podcast air? Well, my hope is that we will be back at the beginning of August, and we will start weekly podcasts again, Thursdays, August through until whenever we get the next length of season done. I like the idea of doing seasons because that way we can take time to put it together and really make it worth your time and we can celebrate the guests that we have here. So, all right, I'm beginning to ramble, so let me cut this off right about here. Guys, thanks so much already for all of your support for this first season, first 10 episodes of Conversations with Everyday Youth Workers, and looking forward to what God has in store for us for the next season. So, all that said, thanks for listening. Hey, would you rate us, subscribe to the podcast? You can do that either on iTunes or on Podbean. Follow us, leave a comment below. That would be super appreciative of us. And if all goes well, we will be back at the beginning of August. So come and check us out one more time then. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time right here on the Youth Worker Daily.